good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for our flagship event series, Rise Presents. My name is Claire Whitehead, and I'm the FinTech Platform Lead at Rise London, created by Barclays. Today we'll be covering the huge topic of tokenization, which I have to admit has slightly overwhelmed me. There's just so many different directions to go in, and so much opportunity in the space. Luckily for you guys, I won't be speaking too much. We've got really knowledgeable and experienced group of experts who will be sharing their work and their thoughts on the subject. As always, we welcome interaction from the audience, so please submit your questions now. It's super easy. Just type sli.do into your phone or on your browser and use the hashtag tokenization, which is with a Z, not an S. You'll have access to the feed, so you'll be able to see other questions that have been submitted. If you see any questions that that you like and you think you'd like me to put forward to the group, please use the kind of the thumbs up function, and it'll kind of move the questions up to the top, and I'll know how to prioritize those. Before we kick off, I'll hand over to our brilliant General Manager, Tony Margiotta, who is the heartbeat of our Shoreditch home. Tony, can you give us a quick bit of information on who we are and what we're up to?
Claire, thank you so much, and I love that bit. The heartbeat, it's not just me, it's the team. Well, welcome to Rise and to our flagship event series and tokenization. We have some great subjects, and this one is really going to be cool. So my name is Tony Margiotta, and I'm the GM here at our London club, Rise London, as we call it, created by Barclays, or as everyone knows us, we're the hashtag home of fintech. It's the place to be if you're a fintech. Generically, it doesn't matter which part of the world, get involved with us. Our mission in general is to connect technology, talent, and trends from across the Rise ecosystem to help us accelerate innovation, growth within the financial service industry. So totally focused on fintech. We have 3 clubs. This one here in London, one in New York City, which is thriving, and we also have one in Mumbai. Now, if you put all those together, in summary, we have over, I think, 1,000 plus individual members, 175 resident companies. Some of those, a lot of those are award-winning companies in fintech. Over 80,000 people visit our clubs yearly when we're in the physical form coming in to meet. And that all equates to around 37,000 plus social media followers. What makes us different, though, and I always say this and underline it, is the fact that we are really committed to helping our companies with their growth, whether it's 2 people or 55 people in a company. And that's where I come within the London club, because we have just under 40 fintech companies there, all connecting and creating a wonderful community. So that's about it. I don't do it on my own. I've got a fantastic team with me, and of course Claire running alongside me from Barclays. So it's a great team. If you're interested, give me a shout. And that's it, and enjoy today.
Thanks, Tony. One more thing from me before we jump into the session. Rise produces a quarterly insights report to identify and examine the important topics and trends in fintech and highlight the ecosystem of startups, investors, and corporate partners that we've built. The latest report looks at diversity in fintech, calling attention to underrepresentation. For example, ways to address the wealth gap, why investing in diverse founders makes good business sense, and how tackling bias in AI is so important. Head to our website to download the full report. It is a kind of easy to read, bite-sized report, so definitely take a look and share it with your network. As I said, we've got 4 amazing speakers today, so we're going to dive into some of the work that they're doing, which covers a breadth of the tokenization landscape. I'm very pleased to welcome Mirav, Andrea, Ian, and Ayaz. Thank you for joining us today. We're in very safe hands. Let's start with a quick round robin. Could you each introduce yourself and also share something you have achieved during lockdown? It could be anything, a new skill, a book you've read, anything really. Let's kick off with Mirav.
Well, I'm kind of debating about things I've achieved. But I can say that the biggest, I think like kind of like growth that I felt was, you know, I'm used to giving lectures on stages, and for me, giving lectures on you know, on a digital channel is kind of like it was weird at first. But here I am, so I'm doing it and I'm happy with it. So I guess that's something I've achieved during this time.
Cool. And tell us a little bit about the work you're doing at the moment. Well, actually, you're going to jump into it, but just give us a 10 seconds on who you're working for or what you're doing.
All right, so I'm COO at Iconic, which is a technology company for fan engagement in sports and entertainment, based in Monaco. And other than that, I work with regulators and financial institutions in Israel and around the world regarding everything that has to do with fintech and growing. I'd say with the speed of technology and kind of adapting to the changes that are happening around us. That's like 10 seconds, right?
That's perfect. Let's move on to Andrea.
Thank you. Well, I'll start with the introduction, I guess. So I currently work with Bloomberg, looking after Southern Europe business and the realities products. And at the same time, I run with other bright guys a small venture capital and startup consultancy called Ligas Ventures, with whom I interact with the crypto world and more, you know, startups. We work mainly on the fintech vertical, but recently we've been exposing ourselves to food tech and other industries as well. What have I achieved? Well, I think, you know, like staying safe first is a great achievement, I guess, these days. But also managing to, you know, like keep all my projects moving and see, you know, the different business I work with growing regardless of the impact of COVID, I think was a very great satisfaction. While I was beating, you mentioned any book or something that we've been reading. I've been reading CEO Next Door, which I suggest anyone should read. I think it really helps you, you know, set in the right mindset.
Brilliant. Good one. Good recommendation. Okay, over to you, Ian.
Thanks, Claire. So I'm Ian Johnson, Managing Director for Marqeta in Europe. So Marqeta is a modern card issuing platform. In terms of what I achieved and I'm most proud of during lockdown, the correct answer is spending lots of time with my family and 2 young kids. That's the politically correct answer. The true answer is that I somehow managed to time it perfectly to escape to a Greek island for 2 weeks of summer holiday and got back just before they locked it down and made you quarantine when you got back. So I think from a timing perspective, that's probably as good as it's ever got from my point of view.
I'm really lucky. I think a lot of us have been holidaying in the UK this year. And finally, Ayaz.
Thanks, Claire. So my name is Ayaz. I'm actually a fintech digital finance expert in developing economies, and I am currently advising the UN on digital topics. And the 3 topics I really focus on is 1, building inclusive, resilient digital economies in emerging markets, fintech for good, which is the 2nd topic. And the 3rd topic is how do we advance the governance of global digital finance platforms, of the likes of the ones that come from e-commerce, social media, etc., in a way that supports a sustainable future. In terms of what I have achieved during the lockdown, I needed to think about it actually, but I bought myself a handpan. For those who know what a handpan is, it's like this funky instrument that looks like a flying saucer. And I've been playing a little bit. Obviously, that didn't make my neighbors very happy, but I did have a good time. So that's what I did.
That sounds brilliant. I'm really looking forward to hearing your piece towards the end of the session. So we've got a really jam-packed agenda, and each of the speakers today is going to cover kind of their area of expertise. So let's kick straight off. Mirav has volunteered to also cover tokenization, the basics, and give us kind of a 101 of the landscape so we can build on that. Over to you, Mirav. Do you want to share your slides?
All right. Yeah, I created a presentation. I'm going to share it right now. All right. Can you guys see everything properly? Whoops.
We can if you want to. Yeah, that's perfect.
Perfect. You see it properly? All right. Okay. So first of all, hi everybody. And I'm going to be, opening this kind of with explaining what tokenization is and how it's affecting the future of the financial services. And I'm going to be kind of like closing with talking a little bit about central bank digital currencies. Let's see if the presentation is also going to cooperate with me. All right. A little bit about myself. I'm a veteran of 19 years in the fields of technology and finance, combining the two for over a decade before it was actually named FinTech. I was the product manager and business development manager of one of the biggest security trading websites in Israel for 7 years. And since then, I've been COO of various technology companies in the fields of blockchain and financial technology. Originally, I was a programmer, and then I became an investment consultant. If we're talking about diversity, I'm the Israeli ambassador to EWPN, the European Women in Payment Network. And I should have said that during 2020, I was actually chosen as one of the 100 most inspirational women in blockchain. So I guess that's also kind of an achievement. And I'm going to kind of like to delve in and speak about tokenization. And you can't talk about tokenization without kind of having a macro kind of look at what's happening. And what we're seeing, if we're kind of like scoping out a little bit, is that there are various forces that are actually shaping the financial sector and the future of money, banking, and everything that has to do with economy. And if we're looking at tokenization, it kind of like touches upon major forces. One of them is the accelerated technological developments, specifically blockchain and smart contracts and everything that has to do with it. And this technology kind of like enables creating a new kind of financial world with kind of, I'd say, digital assets by various parties. And that's what we're going to be focusing on today. So I'm going to open with the question, what is tokenization? And I can say that, the answer to that has kind of like to do with, there are two answers to this. The short answer would be, it's the next generation of investments, money, and capital markets, and, kind of like stock exchanges 2.0. And all of them advancing into the 21st century. But the long answer is actually kind of like, I'd say, it means converting any physical and non-physical asset, even illiquid assets like real estate and art, and we're going to go into that, and encapsulating their value to be represented by a digital token that can be actually traded like any security and traded on blockchain, which is kind of like a new concept, and it has its advantages. And but before I go and a little bit deeper into what can be done with tokenization and these new kind of assets, I'd like to say that tokenization, first of all, didn't begin with blockchain and cryptocurrencies, though, because the concept has actually been around since the 1970s as data security mechanisms for the financial services. And what started out as, like, in the 70s, having sensitive information like personal credit card numbers and financial statements replaced with tokens, which are like strings of digital letters and numbers, kind of like developed into the blockchain tokenization, which we're going to be talking about today, where it's kind of different, where we take tokens and tokenizing, I'd say, not only data, but rather physical elements and physical assets, and turning them into something that can be traded, just like stocks and bonds and all the rest of them. Now, this concept is kind of growing, popular, after having been very popular with I'd say, the cryptocurrency space for the last couple of years. But what we're seeing is that lately it's beginning to take the financial I'd say the financial world by storm. And we can see that in the last couple of months, and we're seeing financial institutions around the world kind of becoming serious about adopting these kinds of blockchain powered approaches to investing. If we're looking at tokenization, we can see that I started saying that any asset can be turned into a token, and I think that one of the nicest examples is art or real estate, where traditionally right now, let's say if retail investors want to invest in them, they have a hard time kind of like buying a Rembrandt picture. But with the idea of tokenization and the idea of taking an asset and dividing it into small pieces and putting it on a blockchain, you can actually break, I'd say, big assets, again, illiquid assets, into fractions of their value, and thus turning them to become liquid. So let's say if we're taking this picture of Rembrandt, the owner could, let's say, decide that he takes 10% of 20% of it as, and create a digital asset out of it, and enable, people to trade around the world with these little pieces of the asset that he's created. Now, the valuation would be just like in any stock or any security that we know, and it would be provided by the crowd. And investors, that don't have the funds and the ability to buy a whole Rembrandt, or, invest in art and in a Rembrandt, could actually buy it's like shares of this Rembrandt. And they could create revenue by holding on to it, and then the expected value would go up and down. And let's say when the investor, like say when the art owner will want to sell the item, they could actually gain from the value, or I'd say the raise in the value of from the price that this piece of art is going to be bought by the next collector. So that's one side of I'd say of tokenization, and the other side of it is actually, if we're looking at it, is that there are going to be new types of asset classes that could be created with this idea of creating tokens that are on the blockchain while using smart contracts and the technology that we have around us. I'm kind of like summing up because I don't have a lot of time, and I want to let the other speakers bring the good examples. But there are a lot of advantages with working, with I'd say tokenization. It's kind of like perceived also as a game changer in the fields of finance, and it has to do with, I'd say, with the inherent advantages that the technology itself has. So first of all, there's greater security on blockchain, and there's increased transparency. And the markets, if we're moving onto blockchain, they're going to be available 24/7, and you can have same-day settlements. No more T+1 or T+2 for clearing that all of us know. And the accounting can be done up to date between the trading participants and the registry and the exchanges themselves. Everything can be done online immediately without need to wait for things to move around the world. And as I said, breaking up big assets that have been liquid until now can allow, I'd say, new investors or retail investors to come in and join in and invest in assets that they couldn't otherwise reach. I'm not going to go into many examples, but because I'm sure that the next speakers would like to delve into this, but we can see around the world, I'd say, different examples of how real estate is being tokenized, and artwork as well. We're also seeing exchanges around the world, like the traditional exchanges, talking about moving their own security trading exchanges into blockchain-based trading systems. So if we're looking at how, I like looking on macro level. If we're looking at how, technology can be affecting, in a ripple effect, many different aspects, I think that looking at blockchain and cryptocurrencies and watching the effect that they're having, and just actually beginning to have on the capital markets, I think this is a really good example of how how technology and innovative technology can move things along. So I'm going to hand the microphone back to you.
That was brilliant. Thank you so much.
Just a second, let me get out of this, and I'll stop sharing.
Thank you. That was brilliant. Just a quick reminder to everybody on the call, you can submit your questions. It's slido.com or sli.do in your browser or your phone or any of your devices, and hashtag tokenization with a Z. Okay, next up, Ian, can you talk to us a little bit about your work at Marqeta, the payment landscape and digital wallets, and what you're working on in that space?
Yeah, very happy to do so. So Marqeta is a modern card issuing platform. So that means that we sit between Visa and MasterCard, and companies, financial services, or otherwise, who want to be able to issue payment cards. And typically payment cards have been physical pieces of plastic that we've kind of all grown to love or hate, depending on your particular preference. And then a few years ago, we started to see virtual cards take a foothold in the market. So, but virtual cards, whilst they had benefits of being virtual and being able to be issued all around the world instantaneously, they have limitations in terms of their use in certain use cases like in-store, etc. So our work when it comes to tokenization is really with Visa and MasterCard and our customers to enable them to offer the ability to tokenize payment information into Apple Pay, Google Pay, or Samsung Pay, so that they can offer improved customer experiences to both consumers and SMEs or corporates. And so I think it's all pretty, many people on this call will be used to the fact that when you open a bank account with a new neobank, then obviously with the onboarding experience is much more seamless, takes place very quickly. You can have a virtual card pushed into the bank's app, and you can instantaneously choose to tokenize that card and push it into Apple Pay or Google Pay. And you have funds available to go and start spending instantaneously, which is a completely different experience to that we had, where we would wait patiently in the post for this physical piece of plastic to be delivered. The real benefit of digital wallets, which are massively on the rise in terms of popularity and have done so significantly during the COVID period, is really the immediacy of being able to get a payment instrument into people's hands, and for that to be really secure. So there is no card information is stored by the likes of Visa and Marqeta, and it's never displayed to our customers or never displayed to their end consumers during the payment transaction, which means it's incredibly secure. The immediacy of payment means that it just opens up a whole raft of new channels. And a great example is, you think about point of sale financing. In the past, if you wanted to take out finance for a purchase, let's say it's a TV, you walk into an electrical store, see a TV, decide that you want to buy that TV, but you want to finance it. In the old days, you would go to the counter, and if that retailer offered point of sale finance, you'd go through this laborious process of filling out a form with relatively unlikelihood of success in many people's cases, unfortunately, and you'd have to wait considerable time for a decision and then get charged a crazy amount of APR, quite frankly. If we fast forward to the things that our customers are doing today, they're allowing their consumers to walk into that same store, identify the purchase they want to make, apply for a loan within the app, get a decision within minutes, and then receive a virtual card that's in-app provisioned into Google Pay or Apple Pay via Marqeta, that they can simply walk up to the counter and using the NFC technology in their phone, make the payment and complete the purchase, with the retailer having absolutely no concept that particular purchase has just been financed. And that's all capable and possible because of tokenization. So because of the digital wallets. Prior to that, you would never be able to satisfy that use case. You would never be able to onboard a new gig worker who, let's say, for example, is doing pizza deliveries. You'll never be able to onboard them and give them funds into their mobile phone to be able to go and complete purchases that they can make deliveries to consumers. There's so many different opportunities that have been created through tokenization, through its security and the immediacy of being able to deliver a payment instrument, which is why digital wallets are on the rise and will continue to be on the rise, to a point where many of our customers in Europe, so people like Twisto, Lydia, Capital on Tap, and companies in the US like Square, Affirm, over here in Europe in Klarna, are increasingly looking to be digital first, meaning that the first thing that they're offering to their customer is not a physical piece of plastic, but it's a tokenized card pushed into a digital wallet, which is highly secure, it's very quick, and essentially opens up a whole raft of use cases that we as consumers are starting to demand more and more. So from a Marqeta point of view, our job is to make it as easy as possible for people who've got innovative payment ideas to be able to bring them to market. And increasingly, the way that they're looking to do that is through tokenizing cards through Apple Pay, Google Pay, and Samsung Pay.
Brilliant. Thanks, Ian. I'm sure we'll have time for some questions at the end. So what I'm going to do is move on to the next section, and then we'll have a bit of time at the end to address some of the questions. If you were finished then, sorry, you were finished then. Yeah. Cool. Thank you. So I think this is actually a really good time to consider some of the regulatory requirements that hold up the token landscape. So I'm going to hand over to Andrea, who's going to provide that detail and also jump into fractional trading. Over to you, Andrea.
Thank you, Claire. I'll just pick it up actually, starting from fractional trading from what Ian mentioned. I think he mentioned something, access, right? This is something that these days we see more and more as a trend. We have plenty of startups out there like Free Trade, Robinhood, and more. These are the most known really, that allow people nowadays to access stocks and bonds and other asset classes by fractionizing the quantities that retail customers can purchase. And this essentially can be seen as a democratization trend where everyone has access to things that maybe before didn't. This has been favored by fintech, new technologies, new ways of doing business. Now, I think the regulation piece, of course, comes in place and follows more or less what is the trend, what has been the trend in fintech in general. If we look, what's going on in the world these days, I think the main challenges that we have around cryptos and tokens, blockchain itself, is that very much there is no a unified qualification and regulation regime across countries. In fact, no one really actually has probably a clue, or they just right now trying to put all the pieces together and build something that makes sense for everyone. If we look at it from a fractional trading perspective, tokens themselves, as Merav perfectly explained it, is a very straightforward concept, right? Like fractionalization itself, it's not something that came up with tokenization, but it's something that has always existed. Now, the way we face it these days with new tools is just a different way that is probably going to improve the workflow and make access easier for everyone that wants to get into the space. If the impact that we will see, in fact, is not going to be very much, I think, on the public markets, because whatever is traded on the stock exchange is very efficient by definition, but this opens a lot of opportunities on the private markets that again they're not really accessible to everyone, and where more transparency, more advanced tools are needed to speed up the process of technology upgrade, I would say. Necessarily these will trigger a democratization in the space, in the financial industry, and again, access is key. Ayaz mentioned earlier, it works for FinTech for Good, and financial inclusion. These are themes that these days are very important, and I believe that through these new technologies and new tools, we're going to be able to achieve new progress in this space as well. If you only think that through the usage of tokens, we can actually co-own tiny percentages of different massive assets. Small companies are going to have more access to capital, and they can finance themselves. So this implies financial inclusion itself, right? So this fragmentation allows everyone to have a little piece of it, but also to not look just for institutional money, but it's kind of expanding the crowdfunding space that we see growing very much. Also eliminates geographical and market boundaries itself, and reduce the overall costs, for example, of listing companies. Now, all this is beautiful, but of course, as anything else, needs regulation. And the thing is, again, going back to my previous point at the beginning, there is no a clear one direction that drives everything. And this has been more or less the challenge of fintech as well, right? If you look at payments, as Ian was mentioning, like the level of payments is very different across countries. Here in the UK, I can't even remember the last time that I withdrew some money. Also because right now it's probably illegal because of COVID. But if I just travel back home to Italy, everyone uses cash, right? So I think we see the same challenges in this space. And in fact, if we look across EMEA, USA, we see a lot of different approaches. And I'll go into deep, I'll go in deeper in a moment. But there are different ways that countries are trying to tackle this. And two main approaches that we see, especially in Europe, are the MICA, which is a market in crypto assets, and then the FATF travel rule. Essentially, these new regulations which are coming up, they show an approach from the regulator trying, especially from the European Union, trying to harmonize and find just one single way to kind of recognize securities. In fact, tokens mainly fall under MiFID II. If you think about it, I don't know how many of you are familiar with MiFID II, but it's something that has been kicked in 2018, and essentially is a regulation that looks after financial markets, the way derivatives products are traded, and there are some disclosure requirements. I don't want to get too technical, but essentially kind of regulates the way derivative products and complex products are handled, as well as many other implications in the financial industry. Now, what MICA and the European Union are trying to do, they're trying to basically cover whatever is very specific in the crypto assets within this new regulation, which essentially has four main objectives. So it wants to provide legal certainty for whatever is not covered by MiFID II. It wants to establish a uniform view and a uniform guidance for all those providing crypto asset services across Europe, and they want to create one single rule that is going to be applicable to all the member states, right? And then there is a special focus on what is called stable coins, so coins that are actually stable because they're pegged to a currency or kind of driven by an institution. So again, the effort here is to create one single rule that is going to help everyone to deal better with this new technology and new assets. On the travel rule perspective, from a travel rule perspective instead, and then again, sorry if I'm going fast, but I just want to make sure that everyone has space to speak. But from a travel rule perspective, we see a more KYC approach, AML. So it's more about, a rule that existed already, and essentially was about disclosing information on transactional transfers of money. And now they want to basically expand this and apply it to the crypto assets as well. Now, there is only one thing here, which is, and this is probably, kind of a personal view, but we need to remember, and the regulator has to remember, that we are talking about new tools, and new tools have to follow new rules. Because what we try to do, especially in the past, was to apply the rules that existed already, to new solutions, and being a very unexplored path, we don't really know, right, how things are going to develop. And so that's why, the regulator should really focus on, I would say, more of have principles approach rather than fixed rules, because otherwise, it's a never-changing technology, something that is evolving every single day. Is a news of yesterday, Sunak, the UK ministry, actually, mentioned that in the new financial regulation that they want to release pretty soon, they want to actually involve a regulation for stablecoin, and probably they want to make the UK a token country or something like that, or maybe fintech central. I don't know, but I think they're going to be successful in that. Just one last bit, and I think if we look at all the other countries, from US, as I mentioned, to Asia, other countries in EMEA, like there has been response, right? We have countries like Japan, where cryptos and exchanges are completely legal. Countries like China, where everything has been banned. Countries like Switzerland, I would strongly suggest all of you that are interested in the topic to keep an eye on Switzerland, because Switzerland is the one that has been the most advanced in terms of regulation and acceptance. They actually provide tax incentives for startups that invest in blockchain. And then we can look at the US, and even the US itself is very fragmented because it's composed of different states, right? And each state has a different approach, has a different recognition. And if you look at the institution themselves as well, from the Financial Crime Enforcement Network, which thinks cryptocurrencies are not legal, and then there is the IRS instead that is taxing them. So there is a lot of contrast. This is what I'm trying, I think, what I'm trying to explain really. who can make the difference, and that's my last bit, Claire, I promise. I think is very much, again, the regulator's approach, so more principles than steady rules, and the roles of custodians. Custodians are going to be really important because custodians are going to be those that are going to deliver this institutional approach and a point of reference for everyone that is, getting into the space as a company or as a retail customer or institutional investor.
Brilliant.
Range.
Thank you, Andrea. I think we could have made this session like 2 or 3 hours long. There's so much to get through. But we'll move on for now. And I know you've got a deck also that you're happy to share after the event. So we'll make sure that goes out to all the participants. All right, next up we've got Ayaz, who's working with the United Nations Capital Development Fund and really covering a really interesting area around tokenization and supporting sustainability and the green list standard token. So just before, I'm just going to quickly remind everybody, it's slido.com #tokenization to ask any questions. Over to you, Ayaz.
Thanks very much, Claire. So I am very fortunate because Andrea and all the previous speakers have actually perfectly laid the ground for what I wanted to discuss here. And really, I am particularly interested in the sustainability aspects and the sustainability effects of tokenization in many different ways. And I would say maybe the first area to mention is that because tokenization allows for fractionalized ownership, as was mentioned by the previous speakers, it actually is going to allow hundreds of millions of citizens to have access to capital-intensive utilities and infrastructure in different geographies. And perhaps just to illustrate that point, I can provide the example of 2 projects that I am currently involved with. One is in Bangladesh, where approaches around tokenization and the blockchain is going to allow tens of millions of Bangladeshi citizens to actually invest in the kind of infrastructure that they want and that they need for their future. From investing in a bridge or investing in a hospital to investing in a school, and they will be able to really choose which type of infrastructure they want to be investing in. And the blockchain will be providing sort of the transparency, accountability, traceability layer that's going to be needed to enable such a transaction to happen with all the protections and the consumer protections that is required. So that's sort of one example of how fractionalized investment into infrastructure is enabled by tokenization. I think there's also another aspect of fractionalized participation, which is not so much as an investor, but as a consumer. And one project that's super interesting in the outskirts of Kampala in Uganda is actually a community-based solar power plant that's been established and that actually uses tokenization for the community to be able not just to consume clean energy, and to be able to actually micro-consume clean energy, but also be able to connect themselves to this off-grid facility and produce clean energy themselves with portable solar power plants and be able to actually trade it. And so in a way, by using tokenization, you're allowing people to have access to clean energy, but also to start trading clean energy in a way that is very close or very similar to what a company like Power Ledger is doing, for example. And then maybe the second tier that's really interesting with tokenization is moving sort of beyond infrastructure investment and sort of access to clean energy is also the way it really allows citizens to participate in climate mitigation and climate adaptation in many ways, because tokenization is completely changing the way we are perceiving and we are shaping natural capital asset markets. And just to give you a few examples, different tokens like Cedar Coin or Carbon Coin are actually allowing citizens to participate in deforestation efforts, for example. But at the same time, we're also creating marketplaces that are built on tokenization like Climate Coin, which really allow greenhouse gas emission trading and repurchasing, for example. And so that's completely changing the entire sort of natural capital asset market and the way we are harnessing the power of tokenization to mobilize and channel financing towards specific climate mitigation actions that citizens want to participate in. And perhaps the final example I will provide is if you even take that sort of one step further and you start looking at biodiversity action and biodiversity conservation efforts. One of the interesting things that you see is that you see a whole new range of, a whole new class of tokens, like the green list standard token, for instance, that's really allowing investors, institutional investors, but also individual investors to actually start allocating funds and capitals to the countries and the conservation projects that they're interested in. And if you take that sort of one step further, even, you see projects that aim at, in Japan, at actually, that aim at tokenizing whales. And I'm not talking about Bitcoin or cryptocurrency whales, but actually real whales as a way to allow citizens to start directing their financial resources to the conservation efforts and to financing conservation efforts around the protection of whales and protection of nature and biodiversity in general. And so I just wanted to give sort of these few examples to illustrate the kind of topics that tokenization now allows us to explore in a much grander way, if you would like, by unlocking citizens' power to participate and to exercise agency and get involved. And maybe just to summarize in a second, I'm going to try to put up a slide. I'm not quite sure how this is going to work. I hope it does, but there it goes. I don't know if you can see that slide, but that sort of really summarizes what I've been trying to say. It's really using tokenization for economic recovery, tokenization to address climate change challenges and issues, and then tokenization to really address the much bigger and much broader biodiversity challenge that we are facing today through innovation and through financialized and fractionalized participation of all of us as citizens of the world to all the financing, protection, mitigation, adaptation, and conservation efforts. Thank you. Back to you, Claire.
Thank you so much. Actually, somebody, someone on the Slido has said, if tokenization creates a marketplace for people to have their say in climate and the planet and how we live, then that gets their vote. So I'm sure you've got a lot of interested people on the call following that. Okay, I'm going to hand over for our last piece back to Mirav to talk about ICOs and central bank digital currency. And then we will have a little bit of time at the end for one or two questions. So got some good ones already, but please send them in, cast your vote, and I'll get through as many as I can. Over to you, Mirav.
Thank you, Claire. I'm just kind of debating. I did make slides, but I don't know, do we have the 10 minutes or do I have less?
Yeah, you've got 10 minutes, and then we'll have 5 minutes at the end for some questions.
All right. So I'm sharing again. I'm going with the old-fashioned way of showing things. Just a sec.
No problem.
All right. Can you guys see my screen?
We can.
All right, perfect. All right, so I think that one of the interesting developments that kind of like happened around us that have to do with tokenization is CBDC, central bank digital currencies, and the question of, you know, is this the future? Are we watching the future of money? And you know, we've been speaking about digital tokens as an investment tool during this session, but digital tokens are also be seen as, you know, I'd say a form of currency. And you know, many of the initiatives and startups that are around have actually been using them in this way as, you know, real digital currency, as something that you can pay with. And it's very interesting because, you know, all of us kind of like saw in 2009 I'd say two inventions coming to the world, two separate products that, you know, one of them was the coin itself and the other is the underlying technology of blockchain. And it kind of connects to, I'd say that we're kind of like seeing a question that, you know, we're all kind of born into a paradigm where the governments are the ones that are issuing currencies, but historically that's not necessarily how it worked. And we're kind of like in a stage where, you know, currencies can actually be created by anybody, okay? And we're at the point right now that technologically any one of us can create a digital currency in itself. And I think that the question is kind of like, what's the use case? And, you know, we can speak about this for hours and hours, and philosophical questions of why would people want to do this, and where is this leading to, and is it giving power to the people, or is it kind of like taking us backwards? And kind of like, you know, we can talk about this, but I'm not going into this. I do want to talk about like kind of like another milestone that happened after Bitcoin came out, which was last year when we kind of saw a use case for digital currencies created not by individuals and not by governments, but rather by a company. And I'm talking about Libra of Facebook. And you know, all of us kind of understand why Facebook wanted to create its own digital currency. And we're talking about, you know, saving commissions and, you know, enlarging their customer base into unbanked people and having the data, which is very, very important, and the power that has to go with this. But one of the problems was that this initiative was stopped, I think, because the idea of having I'd say a technological company that has 2.7 billion users create a new kind of currency, and even if they, you know, they want to create a stable coin, so they're putting a basket of, you know, regular fiat currencies in the background, and you know, issuing tokens is kind of like they're becoming, you know, one of the biggest central banks, if not the biggest central bank in the world, and that kind of raises questions, right, on macroeconomics, like what about the amount of money that's circulating in, you know, in any country or in the world, and what happens to the control of the regulators over macroeconomics. And so the reaction of the regulators was kind of like expected. You know, Zuckerberg was called to give testimonials. The Libra was stopped. France says it would stop Facebook Libra in Europe. But two things kind of happened at the same time, and I'm kind of like taking us a year back. And one of them was that China came out and said that they're going to be creating a central bank digital currency form of money by the People's Bank of China, and it's going to be their legal tender. And on the other hand, came the governor of the Bank of England, Mark Carney, that came and said, you know, why should, you know, he asked a question that sounded kind of far-fetched at the beginning when he said it, and he was asking, why do we need to have dollars, you know, as the heart of the reserves and the global monetary system, and why don't we have something that some sort of currency that is created not by a government and a country, but rather by a different body. And you know, when he said this, it was kind of weird at the time. But then, you know, in the World Economic Forum in Davos in January this year, everybody was starting to talk about this, and economists were saying, you know, why do we need the dollar as a reserve? And what happened after that was kind of like a snowball effect, I'd say. Different countries were starting to think about the idea of creating digital currencies of their own, kind of like to counteract the idea of having a technological company come up and create this by themselves. We're talking about the U.S., which kind of like accelerated this idea the moment that COVID happened, and they understood that they want to give funds to citizens that don't have bank accounts, and they were saying, okay, why don't we just create a digital currency and create digital wallets and put them in the Fed itself, and create a little bank account there that doesn't have any commission. And then they kind of like, you know, retract with that idea. But the idea is that if we're looking around what's happening, we're seeing that there's kind of like a global arms race of creating digital currencies all around the world. And we're talking about Japan, and we're talking about South Korea, and we're talking about countries in Europe, and suddenly everybody now is talking about creating digital currencies. The question is, where is this going to lead? I think the most advanced country right now in this effort is China, which has already spread out their digital currency, and they're thinking about different ways to kind of like incentivize the citizens to use this. And I think this kind of raises an interesting question that, you know, we can't go too deep into, but it's important to mention if we're talking about tokenization, because one of the, I say, benefits of having things tokenized, including money, is that with each transaction, something else is created, and that's the data and the digital footprint that is created. Because, you know, the moment that you have digital currencies or anything digital, you can track where the asset has been and who traded hands and what people are interested in and what they're willing to buy and, you know, pay for. And that kind of like raises a question about, I'd say, the future of money in regards to what data is being
Oh, Mirav, we've lost you.
People are going to be watched.
Sorry.
What?
We lost you
Sorry?
for a second on the sound then, but we've got you back.
Sorry. So I said it's really interesting to kind of like look at, you know, tokenization in regards to data and the data that's being collected. And if you kind of connect it to the idea, you know, of taking money and digitalizing it and creating digital currencies, and then you have the data about where people are buying money, and you kind of connect it to the social credit scoring that China is kind of like thinking about and starting to implement in China, and people are being giving scores about what they're doing and how they're behaving, and is the next step people being scores on what they're spending their money on, and what can we know about people, and how can we kind of direct the way of people's behaviors and thoughts according to what they're doing with their currencies, right? So I like to summarize everything that we've spoken about, because I think we're living in a very interesting time, and we're kind of we might be witnessing the next stage in the evolution of finance and of money and on investing, and this whole time is kind of like kind of like circling back and saying that we're kind of like seeing paradigms that we're all kind of used to changing around us. And if I need to end it, I'm going to quote Gordon Moore, one of the founders of Intel, that have said that change has never happened this fast before, and it's probably never going to be this slow again. So that's from my end, my thoughts about this whole tokenization issue.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's a slippery slope once you start to get into how people spend their money and how we hold that data and how we use that data. So definitely, definitely
yeah,
one for.
It's a two-sided kind of like story. You can look at it from both sides. There's good in this technology, and there's questions like, do we want to go there?
Yeah. I'm not sure. I don't think so, but. I'm going to kick off with one question that's come in. Relating to compliance measures such as KYC and AML, we touched on this a bit, but a question that's come in, how would these be adapted to accommodate transactions of tokens on a blockchain network? Don't know who wants to take that one.
Maybe I can just kick off. And then if anyone wants to add anything else, but again, like first step, regulation. So the travel rule is something that is definitely going to have that, because it's going to require a certain set of information for a transaction to be allowed, right? In fact, FAFT can actually freeze and prohibit any transaction that does not really respect that. I think the second step is very much now something that you need to keep in mind is when you create a token, you're not just creating a cryptocurrency itself, but you are attaching a set of rules, right? Because most tokens are nothing but tokenized smart contracts. So if you do that, and if one does that, and also whenever you pick the chain you want this token to run on, which can be public or private, and mostly might be private, essentially what you can do is to just vet people in advance. So essentially, before getting access to the token itself, you're going to run a know your customer check, an AML check on whoever wants to join the network. Every person that is going to be in the network is going to have an ID. The ID is going to correspond to a certain set of information, and essentially is how you run KYC. I think this is the short answer to that.
Thanks, Andreas. Another question. Are financial institutions beginning to take tokenization seriously? And have you got any examples of that? Ian, this could be one for you actually, because I know you've recently worked with some big names.
Yeah, I mean, from the payment side of things, we recently announced that we're launching a service called Tokenization as a Service to traditional incumbent banks who want to be able to offer digital wallets to their customers, but their legacy technology stack just doesn't allow them to do that easily. So our first customer is JP Morgan in the US. So they'll be able to use our technology from a tokenization perspective without needing to completely go through the process of migrating large swathes of their tech stack to Marqeta. So I think the reality is that everybody sees that, certainly in the space that we're in, there's very few people you meet who do not see the benefit of digital wallets and tokenization. Everybody wants to do that because we as consumers and and as business users demanding it. The big question is how quickly can some organizations react, because they weren't built from the ground up with a digital age in mind. Like many of the people on this call, fintechs, new organizations built with modern technology stacks, built with digital in mind, it's a lot easier. So one of the things we're trying to do at Marqeta is help incumbent banks who really do want to get on board with digital wallets, help them do that quickly so that they don't lose out on market share. So they're definitely taking it seriously, at least from a payment perspective.
Well, I think you'll agree that this session was, really, really rich in great content, great information. We could keep talking all night, but it's 5 o'clock, so I'm going to let you all go. I want to say thank you so much to all of our speakers, Mirav, Andrea, Ian, Ayaz. Thank you for spending your time with us today and sharing your wisdom. Please get in touch with me if you've got any questions. If you want to take part in any of our events, our next Rise Presents is on the 3rd of December at 4 o'clock. Looking back on a year in fintech, we're actually joined by Nigel Verdon, CEO and founder of Railsbank, and our very own Jeremy Nichols, CEO of JudoPay. You can sign up on Eventbrite now. Anything else, check out our website, check out our social channels, or get in touch with me, claire.whitehead@barclays.com, and see you all soon. We will share the decks if we can, if the speakers allow, and keep learning about tokenization. That would be my suggestion. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. It was a pleasure.
Thanks, Claire.
Thanks.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.